What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Bills Chat Live. We are here every Friday night, and we can't thank you enough for choosing to spend your Friday evening with us. I am Josh McCarty. With me, as always, is Luca. Luca, how are you doing on this chilly Friday night?
Chilly it is. The wind is kind of whipping around. I believe it's a little bit more of a rain precipitation outside currently from my household at this moment in time. But doing good. I'm glad the work week's over. I'm glad we're now officially into the super wild card
Super
weekend
duper.
that we are in currently. And then, of course, our Bills are included in that lineup. And we're going to be talking all about that. But obviously, there's one most important thing that I imagine most individuals are going to want us to talk about, and it doesn't necessarily relate to football.
All right, Luca, it's not easy to do, but we got to take off our sports analyst hat and put on our meteorologist hat. And we've had some experience with this as Jim Graham checks in with a Go Bills. We love that, Jim, watching on Facebook. If you're watching on YouTube, by the way, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps us out so much as we try to make this channel your one-stop shop for all Buffalo Bills content. What Luca was referring to is the weather prediction that we could have some lake effect snow in the forecast for the Bills game against the Steelers on Sunday. We are going to be all over that, what we think that means for the game. Does that make us nervous? What will that do to the Bills passing offense? We're going to get into all of that. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'll talk about that as well. Luca, you live in Buffalo, the Buffalo area. I live in the Midwest. We've all talked about that. So I tend to defer to you on a lot of these things. Early in the week, I mentioned to you that the weather looked like it could be pretty poor for this game. And you're like, just hold on, let it get a little closer to the weekend. And then we'll start taking it serious. But, you and I were just talking off air that we're getting into that range where it's time to pay attention to it. At this point in time on Friday night, reading the reports from guys like Patrick Hammer, the latest weather report I have real quick before I kick it over to you is it looks like it's going to be 18 degrees at tailgate, 22 at kickoff, 20 in the second half. Temperature is not the huge deal. Steady wind of about 20 miles per hour, but gusts up to 40 and snow showers with possibly heavy snow coming in the second half. What is your read on what the weather could look like on Sunday?
I mean, I guess there's really no true answer still. We were talking off air. It's like it's one of those ones where a lot of the weather reports and stuff of that nature seems like this is going to be more of a concern, something we should see locally here, throughout the Saturday. We're probably going to experience a lot more of the lake effect and the snow Saturday, and it's going to bleed into Sunday. I'm sure everyone else has seen that and whatnot. What truly I question is just how severe it will be come kickoff, only because when you look at weather reports in the future, it's really hard for them to project lake effect situations. So they don't generally try to do that in a couple day lookout. They kind of just do what does the front kind of, what is it going to portray rather than what is going to be picked up off the lake that will be included in whatever that weather is. And even then it looks like it's saying, 20 to 30 to 40% precipitation or snow in this case. And then from there, kind of you're in that 20s with your 20 to 40 mile per hour situation and winds. So overall, to me, what that sounds like is wind could be somewhat of a factor. Snow is going to be there. It's just truly the unknown is how much is then going to be picked up off the lake that is not frozen over yet. And then, of course, those winds are going to create that band that we see. And where is that band truly going to land in this Western New York area? Like you see some things out there that say during the tailgate that the snow band will be a little bit more northern than Orchard Park, rather than actually in those South Towns areas that, the stadium resides. So I'm going to say, honestly, no one's truly going to know exactly how things are looking until we get into that Saturday afternoon, evening time. And then we really can see both what's currently going on in this local area, but then also how it seems to project from there, because that's when you truly see where that band currently is landing at that moment in time, where the winds and the fronts are kind of meeting in order to create that band, and where is it going to go from there. So, fingers crossed that it doesn't affect the game too much lake effect wise, because I think this is one of those situations where if it could be moderate to light snow and then wind, this is something that I don't foresee being a massive issue for the Bills too much and can be an impact on the Steelers. But once you start really including that heavy lake effect factor to it all, that's kind of the ultimate neutralizer, where then you're even affecting, the quote unquote weatherproof individual known as Josh Allen and the offense. So The lake effect question mark is truly the one that I have my eye on, because other than the lake effect aspect of this, I just see it more of a, yes, it's going to be a windier thing. It's not severely cold. It's not one like we're seeing kind of, it's not the one we're going to see in Kansas City where you're looking at 0 to -30. Thank God.
Yeah.
But overall, the lake effect, I mean, even as Roy says, we don't know what the heck it's going to be doing. So realistically, it seems a little bit naive to project anything now. Let's wait until Saturday evening and see how it's going from there. And then at least we can get an idea if it's going to affect the South Towns in Orchard Park.
All right. Well, let's talk about how concerned we are in a heavy weather environment. And we have a couple of examples to pull from. There's obviously the 2021 Monday night game against New England that I think sticks out in people's minds. The Patriots came in here, threw the ball 3 times and beat the Bills. People ever remember the long Damian Harris run, and that was really all it took. I do think, Luca, that game often goes misremembered for how it went. And I think while that game went down as a loss for the Bills in the standings, it was a very valuable lesson to Sean McDermott and to Josh Allen on what he can and can't do in those conditions, because the Bills started that game off. They did not have the running game that year that they have this year, by the way, with the same game plan the Patriots had, where it was run, 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 punt, run, 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 punt. And by the third or fourth quarter, the Bills said, all right, let's just try passing the ball. And all of a sudden they realized, holy cow, Josh Allen is still putting this ball where it needs to go, but it was too little too late. That day, I'm looking this up right now, the sustained winds were 25 to 35 miles an hour, a little higher than what's projected on Sunday, with gusts approaching 55 to 60, which is more than is approaching on Sunday. Now, look, that game did not have snow on the ground that will affect receivers' timing, that will slow everything down. But I do think, Luca, that there's a bunch of negativity out there right now that I'm sensing among Bills fans. And I get it, guys. I get it. We had this cushy matchup in the first round, a Steelers team that really doesn't feel like they belong in the playoffs, and their best player is going to miss this game in TJ Watt. And it sure felt like the perfect landing spot for the Bills. And now, as the week has gone on, you're inviting this variable into the mix that can alter the outcome of the game and be an equalizer between two teams that really aren't equal. And that's not good. But I think when you start to look under the hood, like Luca mentioned, of what the snow and the wind can really impact, I think we all need to keep in mind that the Bills have the most weatherproof quarterback in the league, and I'm including Mahomes in that. Because what do you want out of your quarterback in these bad weather situations? One, you need an arm that can cut through the wind. Josh Allen has the best chance of any quarterback in the sport of cutting through the wind in this stadium because he plays there every Sunday. Chris Sims said the 2 quarterbacks in the sport he never thinks about weather conditions with are Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes. The other factor is, if it's a situation where the wind gusts are so extreme that you can't throw the ball, the Bills have arguably the best running quarterback in the sport. You want to say Lamar Jackson, I'm not going to fight you, but he's in the conversation. And Mason Rudolph is probably about the same speed as Luca and I. He's not going to scramble. So those are 2 advantages for the Bills. So if you're talking about a situation where offenses get neutralized to stepping back and handing the ball off, the Steelers are going to get neutralized way earlier than the Bills are. And Luca, I think as much as people are living in their fears today, they have to remember that even if the weather is really, really bad, that is advantageous for the Bills.
Yeah. It's almost like when you see a weather issue, when you see the weather concern, if it's going to be severe, there's something in you that wants to be negative about it. Almost in a way, you just want to see the downside in it. You just want to see things like that. But your kind of point brought up about the quarterbacks, and I even hinted at a weatherproof quarterback. It's just, no one's lake effect weatherproof. I will say that. But regardless of that, if you put that aside, if that isn't as major of a factor as we hope it shouldn't be, or could not be, or maybe won't be, and maybe will be. But regardless of lake effect, if it's just wind with a little bit of snow, Josh Allen's still going to be the guy who's getting the ball every down, and he's still an absolute beast with the ball in his hands. But then on top of it, as you pointed out, he can still cut through decent wind and everything like that because he has an unbelievable arm while still throwing it very, very precisely when it comes to kind of a tight spin. So you don't want a wobbler, you don't want a duck, you don't want a muffin that's kind of the point of the ball is going to be catching wind. You need it to be cutting through. Allen can do that with ease. Mahomes can do that with, as well. I think Sims's point being those two guys being weatherproof is very spot on. Mason Rudolph, it's one of those things where you look at the other side and it's just like, I don't know if he is an individual that could overcome any sort of severe weather whatsoever. You have to then go into that New England in the win game plan where you imagine, which they've had a lot of success of late on the ground anyways, they're just going to lean the hell into that. Mason Rudolph may throw it 10 times until kind of the game dictates it, essentially, if it ever gets to that point. And you got to like your chances at that point, because who would you rather have the ball in severe weather, Josh Allen or Mason Rudolph? Of course it's Josh Allen. So kind of where you think the weather could be a neutralizer, in the end run, it could change the game plan for both sides, but it still has its advantageous ways in favor of the Bills when it comes to severe weather game planning on offense in particular. And you just have to work around, if there is heavy snow, if there's the snow issue when it comes to footing, you just have to work on that timing. You have to work on the footing and situation that will be, but everyone's going to be dealing with that. That's an issue across the board. There's not one individual that won't be stepping on that field, regardless if they're wearing black and yellow or red, white, and blue. Like, everyone involved is going to be having footing issues if that is an issue itself. It's not like all of a sudden the Steelers just magically have a better set of spikes to deal with and handle that kind of situation compared to the Bills. You just hope that equipment staffs keep up on it and do their jobs to make sure footing can be neutralized as much as possible. But that is not something that should affect you when it comes to, well, this is worse for the Bills or better. There's only certain things you can kind of truly lean on in that regard that I think both you and I are getting at. And one of those being quarterback play, which is a very important thing. I think the Bills get the check mark and kind of the nod in getting that advantage if it were to be in severe weather.
Mildred saying, hi, Josh and Luca. Good evening. Good evening, Mildred. We appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. Dakota likes the point you made. Talk to him, Luca. Yeah, talk to him, Luca. Let him know what's up. All right. So the tricky part with the Steelers that I have found out in doing research on them, and I'm sure you found it too, Luca, is it's so hard to trust the data that you're looking at, because a lot of times when we do these matchup previews, we're looking for trends and analysis and what do they do in certain situations. Well, offensively, the Steelers inserted a new quarterback 3 games ago. So everything that has numbers from prior to that is pretty much irrelevant because the offense changed. They also made an offensive coordinator change midseason, much like the Bills. And then defensively, their numbers are really impressive, but you have to take that with a grain of salt because they're missing arguably the best defensive player on the planet in TJ Watt. So it's really tough to project Steelers' weaknesses and strengths in this game. Plus you factor in the added variability of the win. But one thing I did find today, Luca, Mason Rudolph in his 3 starts, there was a game in Cincinnati, or a game at home against Cincinnati, a game in Seattle, and then there was a Week 18 game in Baltimore that was in a pouring down rain, but the wind was around 10 to 15 miles per hour sustained, so much less than what's being projected in this game. Through Mason Rudolph's first 2 starts, he went 290 yards, 274 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns. In his game that was just in the rain, he had 152 yards against the Ravens backups. And about those 152 yards, half of that came on a catch and run by Deontay Johnson, a short pass to Deontay Johnson that he housed. Excuse me, getting over a little cough here. And you don't want to take away those yards, but I think there was a clear difference in efficiency in that offense. And you saw 2 offenses last week in the Steelers and the Ravens backups that were very neutralized by the weather. And Luca, look, it's such a small sample size on Mason Rudolph, but I look at that and I look at someone like George Pickens, who had 300 yards in the first 2 games with Mason Rudolph. And you're like, man, this guy's on fire. 0 catches last week. So it could all mean nothing, but I think there is a real reason to think that this Steelers team, despite their tough and rugged reputation of being like the toughest team in the history of the sport because they're the nasty Pittsburgh Steelers, they dominated the 70s, Franco Harris, Jerome Bettis, there's a real reason to think that with this quarterback, with the way they've been playing offense, that they are certainly not going to be the best version of themselves. They could be out there playing left-handed while the Bills are just out there running their regular offense. Anything about those numbers stand out to you? Because I do want to ask you also if you think that there's a chance this game could be moved. Maybe if you want to bunch that into your answer too, and then we can kind of move on from like the weather hypotheticals.
I mean, I can just go right into the moving point if you just want to throw that one right on
Yeah,
top of
move
the fire.
location and
I mean, location never.
Kickoff time. Yeah.
Location never. I don't think the NFL would ever step in and change location. When that idea even got floated out there for whatever reason it did, most likely in kind of falsified rumor that they want to start. I don't think the NFL would ever go to that length in the playoffs. That's something that in the regular season you can somewhat understand due to severe things and you don't want to hold things up. In the playoffs, if push comes to shove, I think the most important thing is making sure that it's being played in the city of which it's supposed to be hosting. So then the idea of it being maybe pushed back a day is somewhat present, but I don't believe that would be something they would even entertain unless it's a true lockdown state of an emergency situation, come Sunday, where, you effectively can't be having individuals out there because it's endangering themselves to be out there. It doesn't seem to be that will be the case. The state of emergency we're currently in doesn't even have it that way come tomorrow for a lot of the different counties that it is affecting. So realistically, I don't see anything changing when it comes to kickoff time at this point, unless something severely changes from now until then. It's just going to be played at 1:00. It is what it is. Now back to the point about the Steelers and the numbers comparatively and everything that you brought up. There's something in it, I believe, that the Steelers may have also understood what they were facing in that. And I would give that kind of benefit of the doubt, we'll call it, to them. It's a good move coaching wise. It's a little bit of a gamble, but you truly understand that you're not playing a team's best. You can most likely win it with a singular strength of yours. And as long as you don't turn it over, you don't kind of hand the ball away, which if you're throwing it with Mason Rudolph in poor conditions, of course could happen due to whatever reason. They just wanted to simplify the game, keep it on the ground, keep the ball in control, get in, get out, take their win. And hopefully they made the playoffs, which then they did. So realistically, I think there's a little bit something there when it comes to painting a greater picture in relation to this game where you won't see as much flash and dash from Mason Rudolph in the air. I think George Pickens truly will only get production when it is ideal circumstances. You're able to actually throw it downfield of a somewhat consistent nature and shots are there to be had. I don't think you're going to find those with a Mason Rudolph led offense in a bad weather situation, whether it's rain like we saw in Baltimore or what it seems like it's going to be come Sunday here in Orchard Park. I just don't see a scenario where George Pickens is kind of that guy, unless it's ideal, that he can truly impact to the game. Because realistically, you have Deontay Johnson, who's a great run after the catch receiver in himself. So in the passing game, when you want to kind of do the higher percentage things in bad weather, you're going to try to get the ball more in his hands, or even a Calvin Austin III, and then also rely on Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris in the backfield to do their thing. That should be, in their eyes, good enough to, control the situation, keep it high percentage, make sure they don't turn it over, things like that, where they know if they do turn the ball over in a game they're dogs in like this one, they can at least give themselves a chance. So overall, yes, the numbers may paint a little bit of a picture, but I do think there's kind of a few asterisks in there that it's like, I don't think that truly says what we could expect. But at the same time, we will truly see. And it's not like, it's hard to imagine that they would go right back to what we saw prior to the last week where they're, hey, Rudolph, we need you 300 plus in the air. Even if it was great conditions, I don't even think that would make sense when it comes to the Steelers' vantage point of how they could find a path to success in this game. If they find themselves in a shootout and they truly need Mason Rudolph throwing it 50 plus times, I don't think that's in the benefit or kind of an ideal situation for the Steelers. Their best kind of offense circles around those running backs, and that's truly what they need it to be. So that just wouldn't make sense in any scenario realistically altogether.
Let's talk about injuries in this game. We're going to start with the Bills side of things, but I do think, despite the names I'm going to go through here, the Steelers are certainly hurting worse than the Bills in this game. So from the Bills standpoint, already ruled out of this game, wide receiver Gabe Davis and safety Taylor Rapp. Now look, Gabe Davis has a knee injury. He got hurt early in the Miami game last week, did not return. Taylor Rapp has a calf injury. It looked like he got shaken up on the last interception of the game, and he has already been ruled out of this game. how I see the Bills attacking those two injuries are Trent Sherfield getting the majority of the snaps that Gabe Davis otherwise would get. And I do think that the Bills are going to funnel more targets toward Khalil Shakir, which I am in favor of. And then Cam Lewis will certainly get the call up at safety. I think he'll be on the field a lot in those dime situations where you see Jordan Poyer go down to linebacker and Cam Lewis will be there at safety. I think I'm perfectly fine with that. I love Cam Lewis. I think he's a very good depth player and has a chance to be a starter for the Bills next year. The questionable tags, Tyrell Dodson and Rasul Douglas. Rasul Douglas, I feel like, is on the doubtful side of questionable, Luca. He has not practiced all week. And look, I know I don't want to come off as somebody jinxing the Bills, but he has a knee injury, and we know how important Rasul Douglas is to this defense. In a lot of ways, he changed this secondary. The worst thing the Bills can do, in my opinion, is rush him back out there and not allow him to get back as close to 100% as possible for second, third, and fourth round games. And I know what you're saying out there. Whoa, whoa, whoa. There's no second round if you don't get past the first round. I understand that. One, the Bills are 10-point favorites in this game. Two, Dane Jackson is a solid, he's a luxury as a backup. He's a solid starter level backup that is going to be just fine. And three, we've already talked about it. You're talking about Mason Rudolph. You're talking about conditions that aren't going to be necessarily advantageous to throw. And if there's ever a spot that you can live without Rasul Douglas, it's probably this one. I think it makes sense to rest him. Kyer Elam would step into that primary backup role. And then you'd be looking at Benford and Dane Jackson as your starting corners. Tyrell Dodson, I think, has a chance to play. He got 2 limited practices in, and we saw last week Balin Spector was the preferred option to go in for him. I would not be surprised if Tyrell Dodson toughs it out. This is the exact kind of game that Tyrell Dodson can shine in. He's very good in run support. And then quickly, Ty Johnson has cleared concussion protocol, so he should be good to go. Got 3 limited practices in. Good for him. He's very important. I think he has a skill set that'll be important in this game because I do think catching and running the ball after the catch is going to be very important. Luca, anything I talked about with the Bills injuries, what stands out most to you? Do you have a strong opinion on sitting Rasul Douglas and the idea of saving him for more important games? Anything on the Bills injuries that sticks out to you?
I'm not a sit in playoffs, regardless of the matchup kind of individual. It's not to say that I would be very cautious with the Rasul situation. I think being that you're in the matchup in the situation that you currently are, you have kind of bought yourself that luxury. It is an optimal situation. If we found ourselves going back to Miami this week, or in the crazy scenario that we tied and then we ended up in Kansas City this week, I could have seen it where he probably pushed through it. Maybe like if something changed. Of course, the report came out that he was saying that he could or wanted to get back out there. But then, of course, Dane Jackson came over there and said, I got you. I'll be fine. We've all heard that whole situation where I don't know if that truly is the case. If Rasul actually would have been able to go in, that could be just him and being the competitor that he is. He wanted to get back out there, of course, understanding the importance of the game. But overall, if he didn't get any practice in altogether this week, that alone just kind of track record of this regime, track record of a McDermott team, that to me paints the picture that he will not be active come game day. And that tells me that the injury is severe enough where you need to be at, like, let's say, to put a percentage on it, say you need to be at 85% to even be kind of viable to play come game day. If he was there, I would think that they would at least make him active and then maybe rotate him in and out based on situations or whatever it is, packages, so on and so forth. That would be what I feel is ideal. But if he's not practicing all week, that tells me he's probably under that benchmark, whatever that might be. And it wouldn't be a surprise if he's inactive. If that's them being overly cautious, so be it. They should feel at least confident that they have individuals that can step in and handle the job based on what they see across from them. You would like to believe that Dane Jackson, Opson, and Christian Benford would be able to take care of business on the boundaries. And then, as you're saying with Taylor Rapp, yes, he's out, and that is kind of a blow, but you're Cam Lewis stepping in for those dime situations where Rapp was kind of most utilized should be doable. And he has experience in that role altogether anyways, that, again, hopefully in this situation, you would be able to kind of plug and play and move on accordingly to maybe buy yourself that week. It's not necessarily that you're trying to look ahead. It's the fact that you have this situation where you believe the individuals who can step into it can do the jobs they would like them to do. So that buys you the luxury of being a little bit more cautious with these injuries and see how it plays out, because it's a little bit of a gamble, but you should be able to trust those guys based on the game, based on the situation, based on the individuals you're playing against, that they should be able to do their jobs. I am with you on Tyrell Dodson real quick. I believe 2 limited practices, yes, that did not participate, happened in between there. The limited sandwich, that was a little bit of a concern for me when you normally go from limited to and downgrade to do not participate. That's not great, but seeing him get back in and in practice, that's, kind of nice. I do believe that could be something where the Wednesday was a walkthrough. So therefore he was comfortable enough. They were comfortable enough to do a simple walkthrough with him. Then when any contact was happening, gave him the day off essentially. And then we'll see how it goes and test it out Friday. If things went well today in that limited practice, yeah, I can absolutely see it going, because this is that game he can shine. Maybe it isn't a little bit of a heavier rotation where then they still get Spector involved or whoever else, just to kind of give that shoulder a little bit of a rest. But I would imagine that's more of a pain tolerance thing, more so than anything else. But overall, yeah, with that, then, I think your idea of who's coming up for Gabe makes sense. And then also, you elevate someone for special teams needs, and even filling it like an Isabella coming up, just to kind of fill the roster out come game day, so everything kind of fits where it is.
We have a couple questions on YouTube I want to get to. Oliver, I see your question. We'll get to it next. Roy says, with Davis out, like Luca just touched on, do you think that means Isabella gets a call up? I do. I think he's for sure going to get the call up, because you're right, Roy. They will only have 4 wide receivers active. But to Luca's point, the biggest issue is they have guys like Cam Lewis and Trent Sherfield, who are core special teamers for this team, that are now going to be pushed into more regular football roles on offense and defense. And you need those core special teams roles filled. So I would expect DeMar Hamlin to be active and be playing on special teams, perhaps in a lot of those snaps that Cam Lewis gets. But Cam Lewis is so excellent on special teams, I would still expect him to get a heavy diet of those reps. But the name that Luca just mentioned, Andy Isabella, for sure is going to get called up, because he is a very good special teamer, and I could see him getting a lot of the reps that normally would go to Trent Sherfield. And then your other question, Roy, about Elam getting a game day jersey, I think so. And then here's the larger point. The Bills, we know, are going to call up Leonard Fournette. So that's 1. You get 2 per week. So if they want to call up Isabella, that's the 2. If they wanted to say call up AJ Klein, who they added to the roster on Thursday, that means they could either not call up Fournette or Isabella, or they have to add one of them to the active roster. So there's some roster gymnastics that are needed there, where, maybe you even look at a situation like, okay, Von Miller, maybe we need to shut you down, use that roster spot for someone like Leonard Fournette. So some things for Brandon Beane to figure out. If Ty Johnson is a go, I think there's a chance you could see the Bills waive Latavius Murray, promote Leonard Fournette to the active roster, and then assume that they could get Latavius Murray back on their practice squad. And if they don't, so be it. He's not going to be active for this game anyway, but they have some roster gymnastics to go through, I think, and, some injuries that are going to call for that. This is the wrong one. I apologize. Oliver, why is no one concerned about our run game? We couldn't run against the Dolphins, and they had most of their D-line out injured. Oliver, that's a good call out. I will tell you, I did not come away from that Dolphins game worried about the Bills' run game. And I hear what you're saying about the defensive line injuries, Bradley Chubb being out. Obviously, Van Ginkel went out as the game went on. But when I think of Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips and Van Ginkel, I think of how they impact the passing game. And then you factor in the fact that Howard was out and they had Eli Apple playing cornerback, along with Kohu, who has not had a good year, and Javon Holland, who was not a fully healthy version of himself. The Bills attacked the Dolphins in a way that I wanted them to, which was through the air, and they were slicing and dicing the Dolphins. Josh Allen threw the ball 38 times. James Cook had 13 rushes. So I think the lack of production in the running game was just as much about what the Bills were trying to get done in that game, where if you look at the Dallas Cowboys game, obviously, I'm cherry picking a little bit because that's their best running game of the year. When teams run the ball more, they get into the rhythm, and that's where you see a back like Cook break off the long run. So if the Bills have to go to that, I'm confident they'll be able to do so. Luca, did you have the same read as I did on the Dolphins game, where the Bills really, if you were going to attack that Dolphins defense, it was going to be through the air? And the missed pass to Diggs and some of the boneheaded interceptions, Josh Allen conceivably could have had 450 yards last week.
Yeah, it's game script. It's just game plan and game script. That's the feel of the game, the script going into the game, the planning going into the game, all dictated itself kind of to lean more so in the air, just due to the nature of what the Dolphins kind of presented them both on the field and then with health concerns that wasn't there. And as the injuries were even coming up, the ironic part of this question, or what just feels like the ironic part, is the individuals that then they were calling upon to fill those roles and fill, like, for Van Ginkel's position and everything, were more known as their run stopping presence, and they're not their pass kind of rush guys. They're not the individuals that they want to get into the backfield to sack the passer. Essentially, they were asking them to do that at that point in time because they were just out of bodies, and individuals that are more there to just set edges, stay in their lanes, contain their gaps, everything of that nature, were now being asked to run downfield and do things that they're not normally asked to do. So therefore, the game just continued to show itself in a way where they needed to pass. Therefore, the Bills were just continuously attacking it that way. So I'm not necessarily concerned about the run game just because of that game and how it all worked out. I think that's just that's just the case of that's what the game called for, and the Bills just continued to press it in that way. And yes, you are cherry picking a little bit, of course, when it comes to a rushing example to take the Cowboys, but it's the same kind of answer. The Cowboys game presented itself in a way where they felt in order to neutralize such an unbelievable pass rush, they needed to attack them physically and run downhill at them. And then all of a sudden, as the game was playing out, they realized they were finding great success in that ground game, especially with a couple of plays that they just continuously called in that were being executed perfectly and finding great success. So why not just keep running it down their throat with those plays? And next thing you know, we had this great successful run day with James Cook and everything on the ground. So it's to answer, or to flip the question on its head a little bit, I think the Bills just do a great job, not necessarily with scripting and game planning, but there is now this feel of the game, understanding how the game flow is going, and then truly what needs to be adjusted to by the offense to then kind of excel and attack the way they need to. They figured that out because early on in the season, maybe not at the beginning of the season when they were just blowing everyone out, but when the struggles and the issues were coming, and I'm not even necessarily saying this is a Dorsey conversation, but just overall, the team itself felt like it didn't necessarily know how to sense and feel the game and understand what it needed to do as the game was progressing. And after things have happened, all of a sudden, it seems like late down the stretch, they have had a much better understanding, whether that's McDermott, whether that's, Joe Brady up top. It's a collective, I imagine, of the entire team, both sides of the ball as well. They have kind of felt games out a lot better. That's why you have found later success by this team in games, because they are figuring out just the best way to attack on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, 100%. All right, Luca, we put out a Twitter question earlier asking for some interaction from some folks. The Bills could be in trouble this week if fill in the blank. And I think this is a good way for us to kind of go through our notes on the Steelers, because a lot of these concerns people have are going to touch on some of the things we wanted to talk about, which includes the TJ Watt injury. And we got some really good responses. Let us know in chat if you have a finish to this sentence. The Bills could be in trouble this week if. And the first one, Luca, I know is going to be near and dear to your heart, as I got to pull it up. It's from Bills SoCal. They don't wear the right cleats. I know they got straight up outplayed last year by the Bengals in the playoffs, but they also look like they were playing on skates. For those of you that are familiar with our Bills Chat podcast, we do a post-game show, audio and video, that comes out on Mondays. And we have a game ball and a game check award winner. And the game check is basically the least valuable player, the person who should turn in their game check. Last year, after the Bengals game, as bad as it was, Luca gave the game check award to the equipment manager because it was unbelievably unacceptable that the home team was not prepared with their equipment. So, Luca, I will let you handle Bill's SoCal's opinion here.
I still feel burnt by it. I scarred. It's unbelievable how bad that was. Yeah, you need everyone to be ready and prepared for game day. That is not just players on the field. That is not just coaches. That is all the equipment staff. That's all the sideline staff. There are so many people that are involved in the success of a team. It is not just strictly, head coach, coordinators, and players on the field. There's a lot more that goes into it, and I'm sure others understand that. But essentially, you need the equipment managers to understand. I mean, the technology in kind of that cleat boot game these days is phenomenal, and you essentially have the ability to ratchet off spikes, put on whatever is necessary. Now, I will say this, being that this is the one disadvantage of having an artificial playing surface, I do believe that plays into this a little bit, where they don't want to have too heavily of spiked cleats and everything of that nature, because that could also be a detriment, not only to the player themselves, naturally, because they could get caught in certain ways, but then also to the field itself, which all of a sudden you destroy this field and you have a future problem on hand. Not that money is necessarily an issue in the NFL. It's just, if you got to turn around in a week, getting a new field may be a problem if major damage is done. That's an extreme situation. If there is snow on the field, you got to have some pretty crazy spikes in situations in order to damage a field underneath it. But overall, the equipment staff needs to be prepared. Like, everyone needs to be prepared. You cannot be caught off guard based on field conditions. And last year, it definitely felt that way. But in the same regard, this is hopefully, I would imagine this is a lesson learned. It's kind of the situation where I'm getting the vibe of with the state of emergency thing, to tie it into the weather situation here, Josh. Last year, when we had that crazy storm that clearly this area was not prepared for, we did not have the ability to clear out what it was. It was a crazy storm, so I'm not exactly putting anyone at fault, but the preparation was not there. I think this is kind of that. We're going to make sure that never happens again, regardless of how this actually turns out. So we're putting a state of emergency out there. We have the preparedness. We have tons of people out there already getting the roads prepped and everything of that nature. We're making sure that failure does not happen again. I would hope that that kind of same philosophy is going on with the equipment staff and with all personnel inside One Bills Drive, in case it is truly a bad footing game and whatnot when it comes to weather.
We have some comments in chat from Roy Collins, who says they could be in trouble if they turn the ball over multiple times. That is echoed by the McChronicle, who was with me during the Chargers game when I decided to do the entire second half live, and he hung out the entire time. And I will always remember you for doing that. We'll be in trouble if we start turning the ball over. Sounds cliche, but ball security is at a premium. You guys are in lockstep with a couple of our tweeters out there. We have Jeff Zilla saying pit rushing attack kills the clock, and they capitalize on a few Josh Allen turnovers early. Lano Pesci Goat, from a non-Bills fan, if they let Pittsburgh stay in the game through turnovers and failure to capitalize on chances to put the game out of reach. I like that a lot. And then Super Nerd 00, one of our most interactive followers on Twitter, turning the ball over and not capitalizing on opportunities when they're there to be had is the only way that'll keep this team from getting the Lombardi. So, Luca, a lot of comments there on turnovers, plus the added part of not putting the game away when the opportunity is there. The first thing I want to say about turnovers, we mentioned weather can be the ultimate equalizer. Turnovers also can. That has been a story of the Bills season. There's been some examples of games being a little too close because of turnovers. Last week's game against Miami was certainly an example of that. And then you can go back to the Denver and the Jets game as a game that the Bills should have won. They lost in large part due to turnovers. And then when you look at this specific matchup, if I can find my note here, the Mike Tomlin teams, despite not being as talented as the Bills, and there is a huge talent gap in this game, Mike Tomlin teams, Luca, rarely, if ever, beat themselves. They are going to force you to beat them. They are the sixth fewest penalized team in the league and the second fewest turnovers in the league with only 16. For context, the Bills had the seventh most and 28. I love the point about the Bills failing to put the game away. I think about being in the red zone and maybe like missing out on a fourth down opportunity or turning the ball over, which Josh Allen does not do very often at all in the red zone. I like the turnover point too. This is a game that could be a lot about field position and turning the ball over. Enough concern here, Luca, and enough history with the Steelers to know they're probably not going to come in and throw up all over themselves. This, to me, was the first thing that popped into my brain outside of weather just completely neutralizing this entire game. It's turnovers. If we get the out of control Josh Allen and it's a close game or the Bills are behind in the fourth quarter, that's already a loss, even if the Bills haven't lost the game because they've made it much harder than it needs to be.
Yeah, it's just don't beat yourself. This is a game where it's funny. If the Bills can go into this game, and I'm not saying in a conservative philosophy way, but kind of understanding that They truly should be able to get through this game, even if they don't have their A+. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be kind of ready to go. Of course, everyone needs to be ready to go. You can't go into a playoff game with your D game, your C game. But I'm saying they're not playing the Ravens. They're not playing someone that you would feel truly that one turnover could literally make or break the entire game. But that is the one thing that can help a team like the Steelers, who truly don't beat themselves. I will say the second fewest turnover stat to me, I agree that it's a lot of coaching and stuff. It's hard to turn over the ball when you barely throw over the middle of the field. I will say that is a major thing. And especially when it was the Kenny Pickett led offense, that never happened. It was actually insane. If you looked at some of the throw charts, like throws were exclusively only happening outside the numbers unless it was within 3 yards of the line of scrimmage, basically, and then it would go over the middle. But at that point, you're probably designing something to kind of be a check down, drag across the middle, whatever it might be. Shout out Frozen Josh. That's the one for me and you. But overall, it's just one of those things where I think the Steelers not turning the ball over is, yes, they don't beat themselves, but they do it almost where they go over the top trying not to. But for the Bills, they just cannot hand great field position to the Steelers. I don't even want to say they can't turn the ball over, because of course they can't turn the ball over, but I'm going to say this is that one game where when the Josh Allen punt interception happens, and I say when, because it will probably happen unless the weather is so severe that he doesn't
Peterson snagging that. I mean, you just see it happening.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
That is not one that will even remotely upset me. It's like, okay, they now are pinned on their 20 or whatever the situation may be. It's like, now they have to drive the length of the field to get points. And it's just one of those situations where if Allen sees an opportunity that he deems it to be worth taking and it just doesn't work out and it's down the field in double coverage, whatever it is, if the play dictated it and he does turn it over, so be it. That is not what I would even call any remotely close to a net negative in this particular game, because you like your chances going up against the Steelers offense that they shouldn't be able to drive, let's say 50 plus yards in order to get into scoring opportunity on you. So overall, those are the ones. It's just, you cannot turn it over early in your own end, early on drives, where then you actually not only are giving them scoring and optimal field position, but then on top of it, that just affects the momentum of the game. And of course, in the playoffs, it's just amplified, and the pressure of it just becomes more and greater than what it is. And I think last year's Miami wildcard game kind of painted a beautiful picture where even if you start out foot on the gas and you go out explosive and it's plays everywhere and you do really well, all of a sudden 1-2 things can happen, little moments can happen, and the playoff game all of a sudden flips itself on its head, and a lesser team like a Skylar Thompson-led Miami team can find themselves back in it, and you just cannot find yourself in that situation because a well-coached team is there on the other side. Mike Tomlin will fully understand how to do whatever it is he needs to do to make this game ugly, to make this game close, and therefore you just cannot give them that life. You can't give them that breath. So yeah, it's the obvious answer, but the answer makes so much sense that it has to be said almost in its own right. So there's no reason to not love that, Josh. I'm with you on it.
Let me expand on that a little bit and make people feel a little bit better, because I just said, the Steelers don't turn the ball over. Only 16 on the season, where the Bills are one of the 7 worst teams at turning the ball over. There is kind of a new age analytical way of thinking. And for those that don't know, Luca and I try our best to hear both sides of the argument. Analytics, coach's gut, which, it's kind of a condescending way of talking about people that don't subscribe to analytics. And Luca and I try to, hear both sides, get our opinion. There is a new analytical way of thinking that turnovers aren't as devastating as we've built them up to be. One example certainly is what Luca just pointed out, which is the arm punt by Josh Allen. It was 4th and 2. He actually bought the Bills 20 yards of field position. Luca, there is a school of thought that as the NFL progresses into this more high-powered offensive league, defensive rules are favoring offenses. Teams are out there with 4 or 5 wide receivers that can all play. The best players coming out of the draft, for the most part, are offensive skill position players these days. That punts start to be looked at as turnovers. And if you think about a situation where it's 4th and 1 on your opponent's 40 and you punt the ball, it's not considered a turnover. But if Josh Allen from the 40-yard line throws a 10-yard pass and it's intercepted, it's a turnover. The difference in field position is basically 10 yards. But one team gets credit for punting the end result is the same. The other team now has possession of the ball. So before I get into this larger point I want to make, Luca, do you believe, and this is just kind of a quick answer, do you believe that punts are kind of like turnovers and should be viewed as such, especially in those situations where as a fan you're watching the game thinking they should go for it here?
Yeah, the short answer to this is how a drive ends, context matters. That's how it truly comes down to it. Because yes, a punt can be looked at, depending on the lens, as a turnover, or it could be something that, fortunately saved field position, whatever it might be, depending on where that occurred. Same for that turnover. Wherever the context is, whatever has happened that then resulted in that outcome, that matters. And if it's a net positive, neutral, or net negative play, that is truly what matters.
There is a large assortment of analysts right now that are really buying into this. People we respect. Dan Orlovsky did a great job on ESPN this week ironing out, because they're saying you can't win a Super Bowl with a quarterback that turns the ball over. And he pointed out the year the Rams won it, Stafford was in the top of the league in turnovers. The year the Bucks won it, Tom Brady was in the top of the league in turnovers. Mahomes last year was in the top of the league in turnovers. And Jeremy White on WGR has been banging this drum for a while that punts should be considered turnovers. And if you do subscribe to that, the Steelers will come into this game on average turning the ball over 2 times more than the Bills, because when it comes to punt attempts per game, the Steelers are 5th in the NFL with 5.2 punt attempts per game, where the Bills are 31st, 3 punt attempts per game. Now, look, you're on your own 10-yard line. It's 4th and 10. Nobody wants you to go for it unless you're just an insane person. But we're talking about those neutral situations, those midfield situations where it's 4th and 2. We see Sean McDermott, for whatever reason, gets characterized as this conservative defensive coach when everything about his coaching history tells you he's on the aggressive side. And there will be situations in this game on Sunday where Mike Tomlin punts in situations where you're sitting there like, really? You didn't go for it, dude? And I think that has to be baked into this entire conversation. If you're going to punt the ball in situations where you could justify going for it, I think you have to be held as accountable as somebody that turns the ball over. And Dan Orlovsky's larger point was Mahomes, Stafford, Brady, Costa's in chat saying Eli Manning. The reason why you're okay with it is because think about those times that Eli Manning threw it up to Plaxico Burress, the times that Mahomes put it in harm's way, but Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce came down with it. And, Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid. You have to take the good with the bad. And I think we focused way too much this season on the bad with Josh Allen. One last comment here on this game could go south if Braden Dwyer, BDWR8434. Our defense gives up big run plays. We can handle them running out all over us. It'll be hard with our weather conditions if we let up a 50-yard rushing touchdown. I understand what Braden's saying here. It's not the 4 yards per carry or 5 yards per carry, or, if the Steelers finish this game with 150 rushing yards, but they only have like 220 total yards, like you'll live with that. It's the 50-yard touchdown cheap run that Damian Harris got on the Monday night game that flipped that game on its side. And I'm with Braden on this. The Bills cannot be the team that gives up the explosive runs. That would probably be more Warren than Harris. But in this game, Luca, that's going to largely be field position, that's probably going to be lower scoring as we get into our predictions. You don't want to be the team that gives up a cheap explosive play. And if you go back to the Steelers game last week in the weather, it was through the air, but it was a 10-yard pass to Deontay Johnson that ends up going to a 72-yard house call. And that's the kind of play that can be the ultimate equalizer.
Yeah, you don't want that demoralizing run, of course. Like this point right here that you're bringing up that we had kind of called at us on Twitter. It's just one of those things where, yeah, you don't want that. I look at as, the example you pointed out in the New England win game, or I even go back to like that Colts game that happened where we got blown out, where essentially they were running free and popping off massive runs, or even before that, I think was the Eagles game where we got absolutely pounded on the ground years and years ago. It's still, I believe, in McDermott era, but just feels like forever ago at this point. Those kinds of games where they are able to spring loose and get massive chunk yard plays, if not long touchdowns, Of course, that's demoralizing. It can really just put you in a bad place where you just feel like effectively you're losing the game off the snap, and therefore allowing massive plays in the simplest of ways for the other team. So you don't want that to happen. But realistically, as you pointed out, Jaylen Warren is probably going to be able to provide something like that for the Steelers. And even then, it feels like this is one of those situations where I'm not overly threatened by the offensive line and the trenches by the Steelers, where I feel like they can dominate off the snap to the point to create those lanes and create those opportunities. It's going to take true errors on the Bills' defensive side in order to create those opportunities for the Steelers. And that overall, you would think, with kind of how the Bills have been playing and understanding, and they've been playing great ball on the defensive side specifically. I would like to believe that McDermott will have a great idea and understanding of how the Steelers may want to create those ground shots and opportunities, that he will be able to limit them, similar in a fashion to how he likes to kind of make sure the big play doesn't happen in the air against elite offenses, against the Mahomes and so on and so forth. I think he's going to flip it a little bit philosophy-wise on its head and ultimately look at how he can neutralize those big ground plays, because that is truly, I do like the shout out though. If the Steelers are able to pop one or two of those off and they can get very confident in that world, that is a scary situation, because then that just adds a little bit of juice to that ground game that they're already going to have to lean on to be successful.
I like Costa's point here a lot. I expect it. I would hope the Bills play safeties in the box. I think Jordan Poyer is going to be in the box all game long in this game. And I think the Bills are going to dare the Steelers to throw the ball, even with Rasul Douglas out of this game. Luca, I have some news and just some quick hitters on the Steelers I want to get to before I let you talk about the significance of the TJ Watt injury and just how excellent of a player he is. Just some quick thoughts I have on this game as I lost my screen here, and then you were down for a second. And I was freaking out. Okay, just some random thoughts here. One, Steelers haven't won a playoff game in 7 years. That's kind of odd for a team that you think of as being one of the perennial powerhouses in this sport. But it's been a while. Ben Roethlisberger was not that good of a quarterback at the end of his career. Najee Harris, the former first-round pick running back, has had kind of a disappointing career, but the last 3 games since Mason Rudolph has taken over had 312 yards and 4 touchdowns, playing by far the best football of his pro career. George Pickens, who Costa just mentioned, in the 2 good weather games that Mason Rudolph played, had 326 yards and 2 touchdowns in those games before being blanked in the bad weather game against Baltimore. So you can kind of spin that however you want to. And I was trying to look for some data on how the Steelers do against rushing quarterbacks. There weren't a lot of examples of them playing rushing quarterbacks this year. Lamar Jackson had 45 yards against them. Kyler Murray had 20. The last 2 times the Bills have played them in the regular season, Josh Allen had 44 and 42. I would expect Josh Allen to be running quite a bit on Sunday. And then another injury note before I do the TJ Watt thing. Damontae Kazee, not an injury, a suspension, is back from that 3-game suspension from his hit on Michael Pittman. And that gives the Steelers some much needed depth in their secondary, because Minkah Fitzpatrick is also back. One of Luca's favorite players, Patrick Peterson, has been playing safety for the Steelers the last few weeks and done a really nice job. I think that will give the Steelers the flexibility to put Peterson back at cornerback, get Levi Wallace off the field, and that's probably a smart move, putting him opposite Joey Porter Jr., who is having an outstanding rookie career. Only 1 touchdown allowed, 53 targets, 65.9 passer rating. The NFL overthought it again on a player that was obviously good. But, it is what it is. We see it every year on draft day. Luca, we talked a lot about Bills injuries, but no injury in this game is bigger than TJ Watt. How special of a player is TJ Watt, and how impactful can this be on the Steelers defense?
It's everything. I mean, the Steelers, I don't remember the exact stat. I know it's joked around a lot about, on the McAfee show and other things where they're Steeler fans on programs. The Steelers without TJ Watt, I'm pretty sure in the past 2 seasons are like 1-10, something like that, when he is not on the field. He is just everything to that team. He's everything to the defense. And so, you have, even in our notes here, the Steelers have 47 sacks on the season, which puts them just outside the top 10. They're tied for 11th on the year when it comes to team sacks. TJ Watt has 19 of those alone. He has numerous multi-sack games. He is a true game wrecker. Everyone, even the most casual of fan, I would imagine, watching this game on Sunday understands who TJ Watt is, the impact he has, and everything of that nature. He is an absolute beast. And him not being there for this team is just such a massive hole for both the defense, but then the team overall, where even in game, watching the overall point and the overall impact that TJ Watt has, when you watch a Steelers game where he is in there, things could be going absolutely awry for the offense, but they're just holding on. They're within striking distance. They're, down 4, up 3, whatever it is. And late in a game, it's not even if, it's when TJ Watt truly gets that strip sack, that key sack, whatever it is. He has that thing in him that he will take over at the absolute opportune moment and kind of either seal the deal or get the ball back for that team to then have that great opportunity late to then go win it. So for him to not be there, yes, they have Highsmith, who's been very good opposite of him. And then Marcus Golden, another guy that I am very familiar with myself, who is a very good edge presence in his own right. Those are very good players that I think can play second fiddle to an all-pro guy opposite of them. I'm not even saying necessarily that they're going to be useless, but where they've found their absolute success, Marcus Golden is opposite of a Chandler Jones. Highsmith is having a great year opposite of TJ Watt. Like, those guys find their success opposite of a superstar, an all-pro, and that's where they can be most impactful, just due to the nature of course, everything's highlighting this one guy. So now they just get true one-on-ones opposite that. The weakness, quote unquote, of blocking, whatever it might be, is just going to be shifted over to that individual. And then it's on them to kind of beat their man one-on-one, whatever the situation might be. So it's just TJ Watt is everything, where then now I think when Josh Allen's lining up and he's kind of assessing things pre-snap, he is very, very, very thankful that number 90 is not on the other side. He is not having to look for him like he's a Mike and make sure he points him out every single play, so that everything and everyone understands where number 90 is at all times. And you can now just focus on it like it is a defensive unit as whole. And it's going to be a massive impact when it comes to playing against the Steelers.
Yeah. 19 sacks is just crazy. It's
Insane.
wild. I mean, I was looking at his stats today. He is an impressive individual. Costa wants to know, what's your outlook on Kincaid with Kazi and Minka back? Well, I think when you compound the Gabe Davis injury, who was second on this team in targets, 91 target, or Kincaid was second on the team with targets, 91. Davis was third. So those are going to go somewhere. And then you look statistically, the Steelers are bottom 10 in the league. And that, when I say bottom 10, I mean 10 worst when it comes to reception production to tight ends, touchdowns getting with the tight ends. They don't cover the tight ends great. And, Njoku's good. Mark Andrews has missed a lot of the season. So it's not like you're talking about the fact that they had to go against George Kittle every week. So I think those numbers are pretty true. I think there's a chance for Kincaid to really shine in this game. I would not be surprised if the Bills come out in more 12 personnel with Davis down. I think that could be a good counter for them. If it is a quick passing game, I think that would also be Kincaid. But Luca, I think the move in this game could also be Shakir. I think he's a guy that has been lining up in the slot, living in the slot. And, it's not like the Steelers have a huge weakness in the slot. I just had Sullivan's stats up here, Chandon Sullivan. He has a quarterback rating against of 84.4, which isn't terrible. Last year for the Vikings, 107.8. He gave up 858 yards last year and playing almost 900 slot snaps for the Vikings. Different scheme. He's had a better year in Pittsburgh, but I do think that's a guy that can be had, whether you decide to move Stephon Diggs into the slot or take advantage of Shakir. If the Bills are willing to throw the ball, if the weather lets it, and then I do think Shakir has a chance also in 2 wide receiver sets to get some of those Gabe Davis stats or snaps, because I think he has that flexibility. I think Shakir is the guy that probably most benefits from Gabe Davis being gone, but I would not be stunned, Luca, if Kincaid or even Knox has a big game against this defense.
The 12 personnel shout out, it's a good one. It's one of those ones where, especially depending on how weather, as you pointed out, is going to dictate this game, you want to kind of tighten, we'll call the looks, tighten the game, make sure things are easier to see, are visible. You're not going to be playing as much of a boundary game depending on what that weather situation truly is. Yes, we talked about how Allen can be somewhat weatherproof in his own right, But regardless, with Davis out, with certain situations going on, and then the actual kind of what the defense will be presenting them, it's easy to understand why you would look at this game and go, okay, Kincaid and Shakir, I'm with you on that one. It's similar to like the Miami game when it comes to a game plan going into it, where there should be avenues to attack with those individuals in this game. There should be something there. It's not that Minka Fitzpatrick is a bad player or Kazi as a whole is a bad player. It's just evidence shows that their ability to stop tight ends, especially pass catching tight ends, is not there. It's not the greatest. And there should be opportunities had when it comes to an individual that is seen. Yes, he's had occasional drop issues, but it's not something where I would think even it's going to even be in the mind of Josh Allen. And overall, you would think reliable hands in Kincaid. Shakir is obviously really rising to the occasion of late, especially. It's one of those things where, yeah, it's definite. And then I'll even give it here where it's like, you're not even mentioning Diggs. It's unusual. Diggs is Diggs. He will still be there. He will still do his thing. It's the reason for not mentioning Diggs is it's almost like one of those things where it's not an afterthought due to insult or anything of that nature. You will get Diggs looks. There will be those things. You saw it in Miami last week. You've been seeing it in those key games, like in the Kansas City game, where you need to just make sure Diggs is involved. He is an individual who will get the ball in his hands. We're just looking at it outside of that obvious, we'll call it, avenue where they will be getting the ball to. So I can see a successful world for Kincaid and Shakir. It's almost like, my daily lineup, that it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, I like a lot of the things that they can do inside the numbers, attacking the safeties, attacking the middle of the field with those two individuals.
Marianne, that's a good call out by you, though, because we hadn't mentioned Diggs. And I know I'm guilty of it, too. When you start breaking down these matchups, you start to think about things like what's unique about this matchup. And I take for granted Diggs. I kind of come into it expecting him to get his. I don't really worry about who the cornerback is opposite him. And I know Diggs hasn't had a 100-yard game since early October. I do think last week against Miami was a sight for sore eyes because, one, his snap count got above 80%, which we projected on this show. We thought it was by design that his snap count was down to kind of offset some of the early season overusage he had under Ken Dorsey, got him back down to kind of like that median level to keep his legs fresh. I do think in the playoff games, you'll see Diggs 80-85%. And in a game where I don't expect the Bills to necessarily throw with a ton of volume, I do think they're going to try to make every pass attempt count. And that will funnel a lot to Diggs. Now, Porter is excellent. I'm not going to at all fear a rookie cornerback on Diggs. Patrick Peterson, if you make a mistake, is absolutely going to make you pay for it. But I think Diggs can get him. And I would not be surprised at all if Luca and I on the postgame show are talking about Stephon Diggs as the reason why the Bills won this game. But that's a great call out by you. And I'm glad you mentioned it. And James even mentioned it as well in chat. All right, Luca. Well, let's get into our predictions for this game. Let us know in chat. Do you think the Bills are going to win Super Wild Card Weekend? The Bills are undefeated on Super Wild Card Weekend, 3 in a row. Kind of unfair that the Bills have been the 2 seed now twice in the last 3 years. And the last 3 years are the first 3 years that the 2 seed has not gotten a bye. So maybe the Bills will be the 1 seed eventually. The Bills are started this week as a 10-point favorite. It's down to basically 9.5. I do think that's more so having to do with the weather than anything matchup related. We've talked a lot about the Steelers defense. We talked about their offense. We talked about the Bills injuries. We talked a lot about weather. Let's get some predictions in from chat. Costa says Bills 24-10. Luca, the 7 seed Steelers. I had an energy drink earlier, and my stomach is like, Luca. 7 seed Steelers, 2 seed Bills. Do the Bills stay undefeated on Super Wild Card Weekend? And do 2 seeds in the NFL, since this new format, stay undefeated with the Buffalo Bills beating the Steelers?
Shout out the Super Wildcard Weekend for the Bills being a 2 seed twice and playing the 7 seed. And neither of those games, if we recall, were anywhat comfortable. Phillip Rivers in his last game was very close to a Hail Mary, ironically enough, in that season in particular, from actually winning the game. And then, of course, last year with Luke Skywalker Thompson almost leading a comeback in Buffalo for the Miami Dolphins. It's one of those things where I look at this game and it's almost like I can definitely see an uncomfortable situation, especially if weather is just cataclysmic, we'll call it. It's just an absolute crap show. It's a whiteout everywhere. It's a nostalgic look back on Shady against the Colts whatever the situation might be. I'm hoping that won't necessarily be the severe case, but we shall see. I will say, though, it's very, very, very difficult for me to realistically sit back and think there is a successful avenue for the Steelers to keep this one close going into the very late stretch of the game. What I will say as a caveat for that, I told you off air, and I just the thought and idea cannot get out of my head. The one thing and the one place that we have seen a little bit of a struggle from the Bills is early on in games in those scripted moments and kind of where teams can game plan going into it, how they want to attack early to try to start out on the front foot, especially offensively. It does seem like we win coin tosses a decent amount. I'm going to go under the assumption we win the coin toss in this one, in this scenario. If that world happens, I can see something very similar to like the Raiders game early on. Obviously, weather was not a factor in that game, but just game script wise, where the Steelers do find a little bit of success. They figured out something on film that they planned for, and they attack the Bills to methodically move down the field, end up in a touchdown. The Bills then cannot respond, but then all of a sudden a turnover happens, the Bills score, and it feels like at that point in time, the game is flipped back for the Bills, and you're not looking back at that point on, and the Bills somewhat win comfortably. That idea of this game being similar to something like that is just something I have not been able to get out of my head all week. So therefore, my prediction for this game is just going to be, it might not be as high scoring for the Bills' sake as that Raiders game was, but ultimately I see something like a 27-13 Bills win. That's just where my head goes. It's just ultimately what I see. Maybe even something like 27-17, where a late Steelers touchdown kind of puts it at that 10 spot. And if you're a betting person with this spread, you're going to really hate that depending on what side you're on, since it did move to 9.5. But overall, that's just one of those things where I cannot get that idea of my head, so I'm just going to leave it where it is. I'm going to go ahead with the score prediction of 27-17. I think that is just what I've had early on, and it seems to have just felt right regardless of the weather situation and everything involved.
All right, so Luca has the Bills winning. Will I follow suit? I will. I think you want to be concerned about the weather. I hear you. I think the Bills have the best answer to weather football there is in the sport in Josh Allen. He can run as a quarterback. He can throw it through the wind as well as anybody. If the passing game is neutralized, he will be the last quarterback in the league to be neutralized. Guys like Mason Rudolph will be affected far before someone like Josh Allen. So if the weather gets to the point where both quarterbacks are neutralized, that's unfortunate, but they still have his legs they can account for, which is a counterpunch the Steelers. I do think James Cook is going to be a big story in this game. Playoff Lenny. You don't get nicknamed Playoff Lenny for coming up small in playoff games. I think he's somebody to keep an eye on in this game. I expect the Steelers to try to blitz the Bills in early passing down situations. And I do think Leonard Fournette's ability to block is going to be important. Ty Johnson is somebody I think could factor into the offense. We mentioned Kincaid, Shakir, Diggs. I am going to have a weird score here, but the reasoning is this. I think this could be the kind of game where both teams feel better about going for two than kicking extra points in wind and bad conditions. I'm going to take the Bills 25-11. And that's basically, what did I have here? 22 points. So that's a touchdown with two touchdowns with a 2-point conversion made, one touchdown with a 2-point conversion missed, and somehow, some way, Tyler Bass puts a field goal through at some point in time and impresses us all, and maybe like right before halftime. And then I think the Steelers also get a field goal at some point and get a touchdown with a 2-point conversion. I do think the Steelers running game is going to be effective. I do expect Mason Rudolph to potentially make some plays early in this game. Luca likes to talk a lot about the script. The Bills have not been great in the scripted situations. If the weather allows for it, I think you could see a situation where, the Steelers get some short passes, but the Steelers are kind of a kill you by paper cut team. And, good luck putting together those long drives. I don't expect the Steelers to put up a lot of points in this game. As far as the Bills go, nothing cheap, nothing deep. Don't give up the big play to George Pickens. Don't give up the long run to Najee Harris or Jalen Warren. Don't give up the blocked punt that we saw 2 years ago on opening day. Make the Steelers come in here and beat you. Don't kill yourself with penalties. Don't kill yourself with turnovers. And I think that the Bills are the decisively better team. And I will also tell you this. There's a lot of concern about the Bills playing down to opponents. And there's a lot of concern about, do the Bills get lazy in certain games? I think I have a pretty good feel on this team. I think this Bills team is well aware of the egg they laid last year in the playoffs. And we all spent the entire offseason coming up with excuses. They were tired. They were worn out from the DeMar Hamlin situation. They were worn out from traveling multiple times in bad weather situations. They were worn out from an early bye. And I think the fact that this game is in bad weather conditions and they spent all offseason having to hear people like Eli Apple talk about how soft they were in those conditions. I have a feeling, and I didn't predict it. I predicted 25-11. I think there is a chance that the Bills come out and just blow the doors off the Steelers and take out a year's worth of frustration and put the absolute stamp on this game of, we are here, we are ready to fight, and you better recognize who we are. And if that happens, I think you're looking at something similar to what happened in New England a couple years ago in the playoffs, where it's obvious from the get-go who the better team is, and the Bills just take out an unbelievable amount of frustration on this Steelers team that doesn't belong on the same field with them. And I think there is an absolute world where the Bills do that. And I've kind of had that feeling all week, and I've been kind of wanting to sit on it. And the weather kind of dampens that, no pun intended. But I do think that is certainly within these Bills, as I think you could absolutely see the best version of them. And holy cow, Luca, if the Bills come out in these weather conditions that are going to, we had a comment up here earlier, and I think it was a good comment. Why do people say, here we go, it's from Dave, I hate how people think we have home field advantage in this weather. Dave, you're right. That has not played out historically. If the Bills come out in this weather against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are the ultimate blue collar team, and just dominate them, out physical them, blow their doors off, and Josh Allen looks weatherproof, and the Bills go on to win like 44-6, what's the league going to say now? The Bills rode a 5-game winning streak into the playoffs. They just dominated in awful weather. They are going to become the betting favorite to win the entire thing. I think that's within the realistic outcomes of this game. It's not my prediction. I would not be stunned at all if it happens, Luca.
That's fair. I would say, like, it's not surprising if they were to, and this is just the only caveat I would say is, if it's truly a lake effect game, then I will be like, I would be stunned if it is, because that is just something I wouldn't ever expect any team, no matter how good you are, the greatest show on turf, even if it's indoors and still the lake effect they're dealing with, no one's going to handle that very well. Barring that outcome, if it's still just, wind combined with a, we'll call not blizzard, lake effect, snow level kind of situation, I can still see it where Josh Allen is that weatherproof guy. It would not surprise me. It's not something I would expect. Like you said, it's not something we will sit here and predict. Seems irresponsible almost in a way to do so. It's just not realistic, but it should not surprise anyone. And boy, would it be fun if that were to be something that they truly did kind of bottle up for this week. They see what's in front of them. They see the opportunity that it could be to then present to the world, that it's like last year was last year. This is this year. We're a very different squad. We have a different mentality in-house. We have a different mindset on what we're trying to achieve this go around, that we are ready to go, even with this kind of situation in front of us. So yeah, it's a good shout. It's a good kind of thing to even bring out there to say, hey, this is still something that maybe could happen.
I just kind of picture us on Sunday night recording Bill's chat, just being like, I can't believe we overthought it. I can't believe we sat here and worried about the weather. I can't believe we were worried about Najee Harris and George Pickens. Like this Bills team, I just it's in my gut, and I don't have overly optimistic gut feelings on the Bills. That Luca can tell you. I'm the guy that, like, they're getting ready to play, a terrible team, and I'm like, I don't know, Luca.
Yeah,
I don't know. Desmond Ridder, he could get hot. All right, but Luca, you had no idea I'm going to do this. Before we get to Luca's locks, I want chat to settle a debate for us, because we've argued about something. Argued is kind of a playful term, but you and I very much disagree on something this weekend, and it has to do with tomorrow night's game. The Chiefs and the Dolphins. What a beauty that is, speaking of bad weather. And you and I very much disagree with who we should be rooting for in that game.
Yeah.
I am 100%. Now, I think we both agree who we think is going to win the game. I am 100% on go Dolphins go. And my reason is simple. That means that the Bills will not have to play Patrick Mahomes. And I understand Mahomes would be coming to Buffalo, and a lot of us want to see the Bills get the Chiefs in our building. But Patrick Mahomes is the NFL's answer to Michael Jordan. I understand he's throwing to you and me right now at wide receiver, but Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid in a playoff scenario is still incredibly scary. And if you can get them out of the tournament before the Bills have to go through them, and instead we're looking at Joe Flacco or rookie CJ Stroud, who Luca and I are both high on. And I know Luca's very high on the Browns. He'll get into that for his reasoning in a second. I am all for that. So go Dolphins, go. Luca, you have another thought here that if the Chiefs win, it could actually be the best thing for the Bills.
Look, I understand history is what it is, and the feeling of not being comfortable, understandably, is there with Mahomes and Andy Reid, even if it were to be in our house. The bottom line is this: there is an opportunity to be had right now where I think the example about with the Chiefs is quite there, where I think even an individual like Sims, I want to say Sims said this, but I know I've heard it around other people that, of course, are in that business and whatnot, that say it's like in that Dolphins game, can you realistically say right now with what you've seen for the length of this season that Chiefs team, if punched in the mouth early by the Dolphins, could recover, could come back, when they couldn't even do so against the likes of Aiden O'Connell and the Raiders, who refused to pass the ball in the entire second half? Can you see this team overcoming and scoring like years past? It's hard to live in that world. So therefore, understanding what the Chiefs have been this year, I think they have an advantage and an opportunity come tomorrow night to take care of the Dolphins in that crazy extreme cold. That is a wild cold that honestly, there's a lot of people that are like, calling out different fan bases for not actually going to a playoff game and stuff like that. It's like there's a, and I'm not talking about the Bills game in this case. I'm talking about the Kansas City game. There is a point where cold is cold and almost a problem for your own well-being. You can wear layers. You can do all these things. You're huddled around people. The Bills Patriots game, that was that perfect game, was also a cold one in its own right. But again, when your wind chills are approaching -30, depending on the individual you just may not be capable of going to that game, and I can fully understand it. I would love the opportunity to have Kansas City. Costa, I will not be having a panic attack.
I will. I'm the panicker on this show.
I would love the opportunity, as long as the Bills, of course, take care of business themselves on Sunday. If we're sitting there Saturday watching that game, I will be looking for the Chiefs to take care of business, because then you open that avenue, as long as the Browns win themselves, where they honestly, and even then, I will say this, I almost have a weird feeling that the Texans even have a better chance than Miami of going into Baltimore to take care of business there. I really love the Browns in that situation. I think they match up beautifully. I think they're almost a matchup nightmare for those Ravens. The Ravens want no part of the Browns when it comes to that game back in the divisional round. That I will take the Chiefs at home, who, again, I am still living in this world where they have not proven us anything all season long, that they will be able to kind of play in a shootout situation, where this Bills team is playing in a situation where they can play many different ways and whatnot, that they can outscore you, they can outpace you. I think they have a good feel of what's going on now, especially compared to when they played the Chiefs last, that I see a serious scenario where come divisional round, if the Bills were to be playing the Chiefs and then the Ravens have to play the Browns and or the Texans for that matter, I think there is a realistic scenario that the Ravens, for whatever reason, just cannot get it done there. And now you have a very, very good opportunity of a home AFC Championship game against either of those teams that I would welcome in spades, rather than have to go to Baltimore to handle that, because I do not believe the Bills are a great matchup for the Ravens. I think the Ravens are a phenomenal team, especially against this Bills team, where I would be extremely nervous about that game, that I would much rather see if someone else could handle that. And if the cost of that is hosting Mahomes in their current form and current situation right now, is that payment you have to pay, I will absolutely lay on it, and I will do that. So therefore, yes, Saturday night, Josh, I will be rooting for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Mildred asks, are we playing this Sunday? So far, yes. Luca and I both believe this game will go on as scheduled. There's been some thought out there from not from anybody covering the league, but just some speculation, like why not move it to Monday where the weather's going to clear up? But I think at that point, you're kind of playing with fire and trying to predict the future. I think this game is going to go off as scheduled at 1 p.m. on Sunday, Mildred. So your answer doesn't change if the Texans beat the Browns to kick off wild card weekend. Okay?
Not at all.
That was going to be my rebuttal. So I'm interested in that. I will tell you, every time I watch the Dolphins play, and I haven't watched them every single game this year, but when I watch them play against the good teams, their games have a pattern where it's like, holy cow, they run the ball well. And then holy cow, Mike McDaniel goes away from the run for whatever reason. And this is a pattern of his coaching career. If the weather is bad enough in Kansas City that it forces Mike McDaniel to stick with the running game, that could absolutely benefit the Dolphins. Their running game is as impressive as any team in this league, save for the 49ers. They have so many open running lanes, and they have some home run hitters at running back. And I think the Dolphins have a chance to put a scare into the Chiefs on Saturday night. How will the rest of the weekend go? We'll get some thoughts here quickly from Luca on his weekend NFL wildcard edition as we do the transition here for the clip. I'm going to start that over. Those of you in chat will be okay with that. Let's take a look now at the wildcard edition of Luca's Locks. And Luca, I see you reset the record.
It's playoffs, Josh. We don't talk about what happened in the regular season. This is playoffs. It's a brand new season. So therefore it's a brand new record.
We're all undefeated in the playoffs. So we're going to go down here. And a game, Luca, we just talked about. The Miami Dolphins at the Kansas City Chiefs. This is going to be a perfect game to sit back in your nice warm house, maybe make some chili, order some pizza, get some hot cocoa, hot apple cider, whatever your thing is, stay warm and watch this game and stress-free, because Sunday will be the similar situation, the direct opposite of stress-free. I understand why people who don't have rooting interests like these kind of games. It just stinks when it's your team. But Luca, you have a particular lean in this game that you think is worth putting some dollars on. And what is that?
Yeah, this is one of those games where, we just talked about it. I do have rooting interest in the Chiefs. I do think the Chiefs can take care of this. Miami is just not a team that I like in this situation, just due to weather situations. And even then, I hear your point about, they must lean in the run game on this point. There is something deep in McDaniel where I just will not believe that he will actually do such a thing. I will say that. But this is not a pick that I have that comes to result based of this matchup when it comes to a lean on either side with the spread. This is not a pick that comes to the over or under. I will say I kind of like the under in this situation. It's just too dang cold, but that is a very public bet, I will say. Therefore, I'm not really comfortable putting money on it, because I can see something where early on there is success had on top of players just not having a willingness to tackle until they warm up a little bit. So therefore points early on then kind of screw a very low number. That is the over under right now. My bet for this is one where there's a funny way to look at this one, and then there's a more realistic way to look at it. The realistic way to look at it as it's playoff time. It's Kansas City. It's Mahomes. It's the Chiefs and Reed. They want to do something that tell everyone that they are still the Chiefs. They are the defending champs and stuff like that. And they want to show you they are exactly what you should expect them to be. They are who they are. Before I say what the pick is real quick, I will give my funny lean here. This is the game that is exclusively on Peacock. NBC did this very strategically. They did the one and they paid $110 million to put this game on Peacock. So you and everyone else in the world have to be subscribed to Peacock in order to enjoy this. It's a very smart business decision, because there is one individual being playing in this game that taps into a market even larger than the NFL. And that is, of course, the Swiftie market. And how in the world can you not bet Kelsey anytime touchdown in this game? They want to get him right. They want to get on the right foot in the playoffs. You can get it for plus money, which to me seems insane, because he is always a red zone target. He's always a guy that Mahomes is looking for in key moments, key opportunities when he wants something positive to happen. So if you're going to give me positive odds on Kelsey finding the end zone in a game where they are back in the playoffs, trying to reestablish themselves in front of all of their new fans on the streaming platform that was paid for by over $100 million, Kelsey will be getting to the end zone. That will be happening. It has to happen. You can be a conspiracy theorist and think it's scripted or not. It will happen. Please give me Kelsey anytime touchdown at plus 125 on FanDuel. I believe that is the best odds across all different sports books, but it is still even plus money at plus 105 at DraftKings.
Hey, call it what you want. It could be one of the best days of your life if Kelsey is able to shake off the defender, shake it off, find a blank space in the end zone.
Don't do that.
I got more, Luca.
No.
No?
Please
Okay.
don't.
There is some bad blood if I do that. I mean, Kelsey's kind of an anti-hero, and you know all too well. All right. 1 step forward, 3 steps back. All right. I just had to do it. As someone who had Kelsey in fantasy this year, it'll be very frustrating if he starts piling up touchdowns now that it does me no good. All right, Luca. So Kelsey, anytime touchdown, he's a big game player. That makes a lot of sense. A fun game in the NFC this week, the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love, who looks like a star, a young star emerging at quarterback. Green Bay, I mean, I talk about living right as a fan base, just star to now potential star quarterback. Go to the Dallas Cowboys, the 2 seed in the NFC. A lot of pressure on these Cowboys to get this playoff seed done as they now have home games for the next 2 weeks if they keep winning. The Cowboys are 7-point favorites over the Green Bay Packers. Luca, how do you see this game going?
This is a fascinating game. And I will say this, massive public on the over, and it's fully understandable why. And it's one of those games where I really, really, really did want to make the over one of my locks, one of my plays. I'm probably still betting it similar in confidence for that. But that's not where I'm going with this pick. I love this game so much in a betting aspect because there's a lot of fun to be had. I will say part of me did want to do a little bit of an anytime touchdown theme to this one, and CD Lamb feels almost inevitable. Well, unfortunately, the sports books also feel that way. You almost have to pay a minus 200 juice, depending on where you're at. I think it's minus 170 on FanDuel, minus 160 on DraftKings. Maybe I reverse those. Regardless, you have to pay a lot of juice in order to bet that bet, understandably so. This is a game where there's, of course, storylines in it. Mike McCarthy against Green Bay. Green Bay versus Dallas have put up classics in the depths of NFL history playoffs, as well as recent playoff history. It's one of those ones where I truly can't wait to watch this game. But overall, I think Green Bay's a great team. As you said, Jordan Love has been doing a great job of late. He is a rising star. He seems to be figuring it out. At least I don't even want to say rising star. He's figuring it out. He looks more and more capable as the weeks come and go. But Dallas is just one of those teams where at home, they're a different animal. The Lions game recently at home was a close one, and controversy, of course, was spread all among that, where they probably and should have lost that game due to the 2-point kind of fiasco that was. But overall, Green Bay is not Detroit to me, although Green Bay did beat Detroit. I think Detroit is just a little bit of a tougher team physically on the offensive line, and that is something that I don't think is a great strength for the Packers. And I think the Cowboys just can overwhelm them with speed and edge presence and things like that, where they're going to kind of get Jordan Love and everyone on that Packers offense out of rhythm, where you can kind of see this game being a close one by halftime, but as the game progresses, that's where the Cowboys start pulling away. Dak has been very impressive this year overall, things like that. He's been smart with the football. I think McCarthy's actually been surprising, the most surprising in my eyes. He's been very good at understanding how to call the game with Dak in that offense. Now it dropped from 7.5 to 7. I will happily take Cowboys minus 7 at home. I just think that pick it fits so well with my love of the over and everything like that, where it's so easy to see this game where I could be sweating it going into the mid-third, but eventually Dallas will find their way. Micah Parsons could find a sack that gives them opportune kind of field position, and they start pulling away late to inevitably cover. So give me the Dallas Cowboys minus 7 against the Packers.
Yeah, I think the Packers and the Texans are two teams this weekend that could have bad weekends, but I think we come away from the weekend thinking those teams are two teams to watch next year.
Mm-hmm.
Both young, both good weapons, both good, promising young quarterbacks, but maybe both a little bit over their skis with their matchups. I give the Texans a fighting shot against the Browns. I'm with you. I think the Cowboys will probably overmatch the Packers in this game unless the pressure of the moment gets to them because they know what's expected of them this year. The Cowboys have been a completely different team at home. I don't think, especially with Jair Alexander banged up, I think CeeDee Lamb could be open all day long. And, Christian Watson's banged up. They don't have their full arsenal of weapons. They don't have A.J. Dillon. Hankins is back, so they're not going to be that Swiss cheese run defense that they were in Buffalo. I'm with you. I think this game has blowout potential. I like the fact you're getting it at 7 because I think even if you don't win the bet, there's a strong chance that you at least get a push and get your money back. All right, the third game. And Luca, outside of my own happiness for the Buffalo Bills, the other biggest reason I want the Bills to win this weekend, I want to be in the right frame of mind to enjoy football when the Detroit Lions host their first playoff game since the early 90s and welcome in their former franchise quarterback, Matthew Stafford. That game is going to be such a beauty. There's some drama there. I was at Detroit for Thanksgiving last year, so I have a sense for like how kind the Lions fans were, how much they are just desperate for a winner. I am going to be super wrapped up in that game if my head is right. If the Bills lose, I won't care. But I need this game to be one that I'm able to watch with a cool, calm head. Should be a really fun game. Boy, there's got to be some stress in Detroit. How do you see this one going?
This is an all-timer. This is a fun game on paper. This is one where it's just like, look, I understand what you're saying. If the Bills lose, I'll be in a similar mindset. Although I will also say we'll have to be recording our Bills Chat podcast. Shout out us Monday mornings. It will come out for you. This is a game, though, where it's going to be very difficult to focus on our conversation, especially if the Bills win, because that will be on the other screen in my setup, and I will have both eyes on it whenever action's on because it's going to be a lot of fun. This is a game where it just should write itself. One you should sit back and enjoy. I will say, if I had to pick a side to lean on, I am with the Lions a little bit on this one. I think a lot of talk, understandably so, is about McVay and Stafford coming back to Detroit, so on and so forth. I do like the Rams. It's not going to shock me at all if the Rams win. I truly will most likely not be betting aside. But the forgotten aspect of Jared Goff, who's been very good for the Lions, kind of having that revenge factor, that snake bitten feeling is there for McVay. But all of those things were said because we're talking about both quarterbacks now facing off against each other in the home of one and the former home of the other, both wanting to show something in this situation. They're both great quarterbacks on the season. I think McVay is the better coach in this side as well, which was why it makes it very difficult to touch aside. But all of these things are pointing to offense, Josh, and defense is not very good in this game. How in the world can you not bet the over? If you're not rooting for points in this game, if you are not rooting for offense in this game, you don't like fun, you don't like football, and you're not going to enjoy this game because this is going to be everything you want it to be. It is too good that it has to be true. Give me over 51.5. I honestly, Josh, would have probably even bet this over if it was 54.5 and you tacked on another 3. I think this is going to be an electric game. This is just over. I have a 2-unit play on it, but honestly, I don't even know how much I truly would feel comfortable with betting it because that limit may not actually be there. I love the over in this game. This is a whale play for me kind of situation where it's just so dang good. Please do it responsibly if you have the means and liking to do it. It will just make the enjoyment of the game even greater.
Travis Kelce, anytime touchdown. Dallas Cowboys -7 at home against the Green Bay Packers. And Luca's lock of the week, over 51.5 in this beauty of a game between the LA Rams and the Detroit Lions. That will do it for the wild card edition of Luca's Locks. Luca, I don't like talking about this guy that much, Nick Wright, because he's such a Bills troll. But when he's not trolling the Bills, I think he makes some good points. And he made a good point with Cowherd about, because I want to root for the Lions in this game for like nostalgia, and I have not for nostalgia for those fans. Like they earned it. Like I want to see them have a moment. But Nick Wright brought up something that kind of got me thinking. If you want to play this tournament out in a way that the Bills can find the best path to hoisting a Lombardi trophy, it does them a lot of good to get the Niners out of this tournament before they get to the Super Bowl. Like
Oh
that's
yeah.
just the facts of the matter. And Nick Wright said he thinks the team on the NFC side that has the best opportunity to upset the Niners is actually the 7 seed Rams, because they always play them close. McVay is not intimidated by Shanahan. The Niners beat them in the playoffs a couple of years ago. They had a close game earlier this year. You can just throw away the Week 18 game. Neither team had their starters out there. And you look at what the Rams do, it's kind of the kryptonite for the 49ers defense. And with that, he talked me into, I think I'm rooting for the Rams in this game. I kind of want to say the Lions win, but there's also a part of me that's like, boy, McVay just is going to know how to stop golf. But from that mindset, particularly if the Bills do their part and win, and I start really thinking about like this could be their year, I think there's going to be a part of me on Sunday night that's just rooting for the Rams.
I am truly split on the whole NFC Niners conversation because I know I've discussed it off air, and it's very, I mean, understandably, it's very hard for me to get off certain points and things like that, or at least certain stances or bets I may have in my wallet, in my locker. And unfortunately for that scenario, I do have a lot of kind of compensation leaned on the 49ers come preseason, or that was this preseason. And even things, that is like Bills Niners as a matchup, for instance, where it's like, I'm with you. Like when it comes to just fandom points, you need the Niners out of this tournament if you are a Bills fan, or anyone on the AFC for that matter. Like if we're just having this general conversation, you do not want the Niners to be your matchup. They are clearly the cream of the crop of the NFC. It's very apparent. Whereas the AFC is kind of a discussion. I do believe the Ravens deserve the 1 seed. They are the better team going into the playoffs. There is still conversations to be had on just how close are the Bills to the Ravens, how close are maybe the Chiefs. Can you not respect them because they are defending champs? You have 2-time Super Bowl champ Patrick Mahomes, so on and so forth. There's a conversation there. It's clear cut in the NFC. It is the Niners and then everyone else. But even to go back on a conversation or things that I always bring up in the past, the last thing you want, it's kind of like my Browns situation with the Ravens. The last thing you want as a 1 seed, as a top tier playoff team, is dealing with a divisional game in the playoffs. You never want that. The familiarity is the ultimate equalizer. McVay understands exactly what they're going to be seeing. They have notes on notes on notes and tape study and everything. You build a roster to normally target that top team in the division because your first goal is to win a division. That is the first stepping stone in trying to win a championship. All of these things. So yes, if you are the Niners, the last thing you want to deal with is having the LA Rams come to your house when you are getting back into the swing of things in the divisional round. If I'm the Niners, I am praying the Packers win at the 4:00 slate so you don't have to worry about it. If I am the Niners, I am all in on that because there is that realistic possibility that the Rams come in. And if you are just basically looking at either Rams or Packers, the choice is a no-brainer. And also you dominate the Packers historically as well as recently. It's just one of those things where it's just, you want that situation to be had. But it's hard for me to truly root for the Rams. I will say that, Josh, just because I do want to make, for monetary reasons, I kind of want to see the Niners go through. But overall, as a football fan and understanding it, yes, if you are a Bills fan, if you are an AFC fan in general, you want to see the Niners get knocked out somehow, some way. Like that is just the end goal, because you should like your chances. If you're a legitimate contender in the AFC, you should like your chances against everyone else in the NFC other than the Niners. The Niners is when it's truly like a coin flip, or maybe you don't even like your chances because they are just that complete of a team.
The Bills would be favored against every other NFC team if it came down to it,
Yeah.
because they would have knocked off, obviously, the Steelers. You would think they would have had to go through either Lamar or Mahomes. I mean, they're not going to get lucky enough to avoid both of them. So you project that forward. They already smacked around the Cowboys. I understand that game would be indoor in Las Vegas, but I do think the odds makers would look at that. They're not, the Bills aren't going to be underdogs to the Lions in the Super Bowl. So, I mean, can you imagine that?
Wow.
So I think that I think the Niners would be favored over the Bills. Otherwise, I think the Bills would be favored, and that's exciting to think about. It all starts this weekend, kicks off with 2 AFC games tomorrow. Cleveland Browns taking on the Houston Texans. Great point brought up in chat by Costa. Tyreek Hill versus KC, Stafford versus Goff, amazing. McCarthy versus the last team he coached, won a Super Bowl with, Green Bay, and we almost had Deshaun Watson versus the Texans, but I would be willing to make the argument that Deshaun Watson may not have brought the Browns as far as Flacco, who just absolutely has no fear in the world. And that's kind of what you need to beat a team like the Ravens. Luca and I will be back on Sunday to break down everything that happened on this Super Wildcard weekend, with the exception of the Rams and Lions. That'll be going on live while we are recording, and then we won't have access to the results of Monday night's game between the Bucs and the Eagles, but we'll be breaking down Bills Steelers in full, hopefully in great moods, talking about the Bills round 2 opponent that we will know. And we'll be back next Friday for Bills Chat Live, hopefully doing a round 2 preview and not an off-season preview. Round 2 preview, it's going to be round 2 preview. Calling it now. Bills against Chiefs. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Going to be exciting. And boy, is that game. That is going to be the loudest that stadium has been maybe ever, if they get Mahomes in their building for a playoff game. That is going to do it for us tonight. We appreciate all of you for hanging out. We especially appreciate Sammy for letting Luca hang out with us tonight a little bit longer. I just fumbled the football off. I was so excited to put Sammy. Let me get the ball up. That's bad vibes, Luca. What am I doing? Get up here. That's the wedding party gift from Stokes. I was one of his groomsmen, and it has the Bills logo on there. So
nice. Look at that.
No big deal. All right. For Luca, I will get it one of these years. For Luca, I am Josh McCarty, and we will see you next week on Bills Chat Live.